In this video, we are going to do a baseline dyno run on my 2024 Subaru WRX TR. There are two main reasons why I want to get this car baseline. The first reason being, before I even owned this car, I watched Flatiron Tuning's video on when they baselined their WRX, and they noted that it made more power than any stock STI that they've baselined in the past.
Do a baseline, yeah, and I'm already ready for you guys.
So, I mean, what was your initial reading, and what was your initial impression just of the baseline dyno run on this car?
I'll say this is the initial reading, and it was about 251 at the wheels. I did two pulls with it off. Yeah, and I'll say stock STIs are not as consistent, and I would see about 220 to 235, so a much larger span. And those were all stock tires, stock everything.
So this car, this 2022 WRX stock, is dynoing more on average than an STI was dynoing, and definitely a lot more than the FA20 WRX did.
Yeah, for sure. That's wonderful.
Now that really intrigued me, and I figured now that I own this car, I should find out for myself if the results are as they showed it. Just because if Subaru advertised the STI at 305 or 310 horsepower, and the VBWRX is baselining close to an STI or even more, then that means that Subaru underrated the power numbers significantly. And that's what I intend to find out, if that is true or not. The second reason why is because it's always good to baseline your car in the event that you want to add some mods to it. So you have a good baseline or a starting point to measure up to see what mods did what and what kind of power gains you made. Anyways, I'm still on the way to the shop, so let's cut over to that now. I'll be getting the WRX Baseline at Vex Performance, a local performance tuning shop here where Ryan, one of the owners, greatly helped in setting this baseline up. Vex Performance specializes in Subarus where they can take on any level of service, from regular maintenance to engine builds to full-on race cars. They've got the expertise to handle it all. They're a certified IAG engine installer, which further enforces their capabilities. It doesn't stop at Subarus though. They've built and tuned more Nissan GTRs than anyone else in Western Canada. Lastly, Vex Performance sponsored this baseline run, which not only shows their support for the channel, but for the car community, as it allows me to bring content like this to fellow car enthusiasts like yourselves. So if you're in the YYC area, reach out to them for all your car enthusiast needs, whether it be service or parts. Here are some quick facts before we actually get into the dyno run. Firstly, I'm running a Mobil 94 Octane as my fuel of choice. The dyno is a Dyno Dynamics 450 DS all-wheel drive dyno. Lastly, for all you WRX owners who have eyesight safety equipped on your car, do turn off pre-collision braking before the car rolls on the dyno, just because you don't want the safety system to interpret the walls or anything in the room as obstacles while the car is mid-run. It may skew your results and may slow down the car at random points. Alright, so for the baseline run itself, so the dyno operator did a few baseline runs and essentially just took the highest result out of all of them, but I'll include all the runs here just for your entertainment. Alright guys, so I just got back home and here is my final dyno plot. The WRX made 236.6 real horsepower. Now let's table that number for now and just look at the power delivery. The upper line is the torque and the lower line is the horsepower. As we can see, the torque increases very early on in the power band and peaks at around 250 foot-pounds of torque, but then drops off at around 230 foot-pounds, which is what it holds fairly consistently throughout the whole rev range. Now, if we look toward the power curve, it's pretty much linear up until it crosses over the torque curve at around 5250 RPM. So, looking at this dyno plot, it's significantly different than the previous generation VA WRX with the F820. So here's a baseline from a 2015 WRX the tuner had on his website. Now, don't worry about the peak horsepower number as it's running 91 octane in this case, but rather let's pay attention to the plot itself. The torque curve is, again, the upper line, which we can see is a lot more peaky and definitely less consistent throughout the power band. At around 3700 RPM, the torque starts to drop off drastically and it continues on this decline all the way down to redline. Now, the 2015 power curve also has inconsistencies as well, as we can see it ramp up to the same point as the peak torque RPM, but then it plateaus for a brief moment before increasing slightly again for around another 1000 RPM until dropping off close to redline. Looking at the two plots side by side, the new WRX definitely has a cleaner and more refined tune from the factory compared to the previous gen VA WRX. Now the comparison you all have been waiting for. So I had the tuner overlay one of the highest baseline results from a VA STI running 94 octane as well on top of my results. So the blue lines are for the 2018 STI and the red are for my WRX. We can see that the STI made 238 wheel horsepower, which is only 1.4 wheel horsepower higher than the WRX. Based on these results, when it comes to peak horsepower numbers, the VB WRX and STI are neck and neck. This leads me to believe that since Subaru rated the WRX at 271 horsepower, but it dynos similarly to the STI, which in this case the 2018 STI is rated at 305 horsepower, the WRX's power numbers are underrated from the factory. It really makes no sense to me why Subaru would underplay the power numbers. There's a lot of criticism on the new WRX already. If Subaru advertised the numbers closer to what it really made, which is probably around the 300 horsepower mark, it would sell better. Anyways, looking at the torque curves, we can see the STI hits its peak torque later on in the rev range, and it certainly maintains more torque over the WRX and holds it fairly consistently throughout the power band. Now looking at the power curve of the STI, it is also pretty linear and it has no weird dips or flat lines like the VA WRX dyno plot we looked at earlier. Seeing these two plots overlaid on each other, it's clear to me that the new WRX and the VA STI differ in their power delivery, but when it comes to the numbers, they're very close, much closer than I expected, to be honest. At the start of this video, I mentioned that one of the reasons why I wanted to baseline the WRX was because Flatiron's tuning mentioned that the WRX that they tested baselined higher than what they saw from an STI. And in this comparison that I just did, it doesn't make more than an STI, but there are other baselines from other generation STIs that I was able to get from the tuner that do make less than the WRX using the same octane fuel and obviously the same dyno. So here is a 2009 STI with a really interesting looking dyno plot which made around 226 wheel horsepower. Here is a 2007 STI that made 225 wheel horsepower. And lastly, here is a 2015 STI that made 231 horsepower. All of these results are less than what the VB WRX made on the same dyno, but the guys at Vex did also say that STIs have a range when it comes to baselines. They see it from 220 wheel horsepower all the way up to close to 240 wheel horsepower, like the 2018 STI we compared my numbers to. On that note, I'm pretty happy with the baseline numbers my WRX made, and it's interesting to see that it makes very close to what a stock STI made. Now, let me know down in the comments if you guys have baselined your VB WRX and did it make similar power to a STI that baselined on the same dyno that your car ran on. Also, let me know your thoughts on Subaru underplaying the power numbers. I feel like they're shooting themselves in the foot by underselling the power that the F824 actually makes. Anyways, that's it for this video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I will catch you all in the next one. Take care.